Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Wolfgang Schäuble there. Now, it was shortly after John Major won the 1992 general election that Paul Dacre was appointed editor of the Daily Mail. He outlasted not just Major, but Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and David Cameron after him. Tonight it was announced that in November, shortly before his 70th birthday, Paul Dacre will move upstairs. He's no longer going to have control at that paper. To detractors, the Mail under him has been nothing short of national poison. To others, he's a genius who understands Middle England in a way nobody else does. We'll discuss his legacy in a moment, but here's 4 extraordinary front pages. In February 1997, the Mail put the faces of the 5 men accused of killing Stephen Lawrence on what Paul Dacre described as a pretty cataclysmic front page. This is how it reacted to the result of the Brexit referendum. In a Daily Mail historic edition on the 25th of June 2016, having campaigned strongly for leave, of course. And who could forget this splash from November that same year, branding as enemies of the people, the judges who ruled the government would need Parliament's consent for Brexit. The Mail has come under fire for its headlines about migrants. Paperchase withdrew adverts from the paper in November last year following pressure from the Stop Funding Hate campaign group. Well, we're joined now by Labour peer Andrew Adonis and Peter Obourne, political commentator at the Mail. Well, Peter, look, you're on the home team, so let's lead off first with what do you consider to have been his greatest achievements during this long editorship?
I think he's brought great moral passion to British journalism. He's been one of the greatest editors of all time. I mean, I'd rank him alongside the great Arthur Christensen at the Daily Express in the 1930s and 1940s. I'd rank him alongside the original Northcliffe, who created the Mail. And I'd rank him higher than David English, who rescued the Mail. He's one of the great popular journalists, popular editors that we've ever had.
Andrew,
and by the way, I think that British journalism and British public life is much worse state as a result of his going and departure.
Well, I have to say that, to me, it seems like a moment of national liberation, that this influence, which has been so negative on our public life for 25 years, anti-gay, anti-immigrant, anti-Europe, anti-the Labour Party, anti-trade union, which has not only had a big impact in terms of the headlines, the ones that you showed, and the fact that we're having this discussion shows that Peter's absolutely right to say he was a very influential editor, but an influence well beyond that, including, if I may say, constantly setting the news agenda for the BBC itself. When you wake up to the Today programme in the morning, you often think that you often think it's the Daily Mail that is setting the whole news.
To what
agenda.
extent was he setting the agenda for Gordon Brown's government?
I mean, Gordon Brown. Too much. Let me be absolutely frank. I was a member of both the Blair and the Brown governments, and too often what the Daily Mail would think and what Paul Dacre would personally think about issues influenced ministerial thinking, and I think negatively. And you showed the headline the day after the Brexit vote. Brexit, in many ways, is his great memorial. That, you know, in the month before the Brexit referendum, almost every day the Mail had vitriolic anti-immigrant headlines, including imminent talks about to start on letting 1.5 million Turks in, including Euro rapists and murderers who are being let in as a result of the...
No. That's important for Peter to answer, because this is hateful, isn't it, some of this stuff?
It is certainly...
It's playing on fear.
If you look at the way in which immigration was dealt with by the BBC, actually, for years and years. Mark Thompson, your former Director General, has acknowledged this, and by The Guardian and by the bien-pensant press. Immigration was regarded as something which could not be discussed, because and it's actually something which is very important. It was the government of which you were a part had a secret immigration policy to let in millions of people. The Mail is not. It was not at the time. As Andrew neither are too. We all know that, and it was dishonest, because on the one hand you had Blunkett, the Home Secretary, saying that Britain was being swamped, and on the other hand, you had a policy of letting in millions of immigrants. And now, the British people at no point were consulted. There was massive demographic change, and the Mail was one of the few papers with the courage to highlight it. The BBC never mentioned it because you were But the BBC, by the way, was utterly contemptuous of the great majority of your viewers.
But Peter,
and it's something. Only people who really matter.
On the secrets, where are the 1.5 million Turks? Where are they? Are they so secret that no one has ever seen them? You know, the problem with the Daily Mail is that what it did constantly was to exaggerate, to feed public phobias, and in particular, in the way it started treating Europe over the last 5 years, it was as if Europe was the cause of every single ill which was afflicting Britain. And I think it had a poisonous effect on British public life.
That he had this insight into what Middle Britain was thinking in a way that the metropolitan elite did not, and that his view on Brexit and where the national centre lay was on point.
It wasn't any great insight to realise that there are populist fears that you can feed. I mean, you know, Enoch Powell realised that one back in 1968, 50 years ago. It's not an insight, it's simply feeding a phobia. What it didn't
Paul
do
Dacre
was
is not... Look, this is outrageous stuff. I've put up with you for long enough. This is outrageous stuff. Paul Dacre is not a racist. Look at the Stephen Lawrence campaign you highlighted there. Look at the...
Well, that's his finest hour, many would say.
Campaigns against the torture policies of the government you were a part of, campaigns for Guantanamo, Shakurama. It doesn't fit into the liberal hypothesis we've been getting here.
Let's just move it on.
By the way, I came here, I told the BBC, I was coming here to celebrate one of the great careers of British newspaper editing, not to have an endless argy-bargy about Brexit.
But just in that context, could there be another? Or have newspapers got to a point where the circulations are on the slide, long term, and no other paper could ever have the same influence on an editor? Is that possible, or do you think that's wrong?
Paul Dacre was a phenomenal editor in terms of the power that he wielded, the strength of his personality, the causes that he took up. And I'm not saying they were all bad. I completely agree with Peter about going after Stephen Lawrence's killers, but whether we have another one depends upon whether somebody is able to accumulate a similar agenda and wield a similar influence over the news agenda, particularly of the BBC. And that's what made the Daily Mail so influential under Paul Dacre, is that it penetrated into the heart of the state broadcaster as well as part of the printing.
Time is short, Peter. Just briefly, do you think the Mail under a new editor will be as hot on Brexit, or will it soften a bit more like the Mail on Sunday?
Yes, I got some very bad news for Lord Adonis. I hate to break this to you. The new editor, he remains editor-in-chief. But anyway, under a new
one stage removed.
Anyway, the thing which Paul Dacre brought to journalism were two things. One was immense craftsmanship. Second, a fanatical devotion to accuracy. If you go into the Mail newsroom, which is a proper newsroom, one of the few left, real seriousness about journalism, about accuracy. It says check, check, and check again. There's a revolving screen in the newsroom. And those are the legacies, along with abiding moral passion about the values which matter.
But
that is why.
And I'm sorry.
But the 1.5 million Turks never materialised, nor did the talks within days.
I did notice, Lord Adonis, you did agree on his qualities as an editor, and I think there, on that rare point of consensus between the two of you, we must leave it. Thank you both very much indeed.
I've been